Ancient Technologies comments. So, obviously, I had a couple of them back and forth with the infamous Flint Dibble. So, I just pointed out the fact that he made a statement about evidence, you know, and hypothesis. And I point out the fact that it's like, you know, that because he stated the idea that, when you look at evidence, it's obvious what it is, and it's like, if evidence was obvious what it is, you wouldn't be hypothesizing, right? So it's like he didn't realize he contradicted himself by saying that, evidence is obvious what it is, right? But then mentioned the idea that you have to hypothesize, which is speculate, just another way of saying speculate on what this evidence that you have, this thing, is, right? Because you don't know what it is yet. So I just point out the fact that it's like, yeah, you're trying to redefine what hypothesizing is and what assumption or speculation is. That's the thing. In his video, he's talking about speculation, saying that archaeologists don't speculate, we hypothesize. Hypothesize is just a fancier way of saying speculate. That's it. It's the same thing. It's you don't know what this is, so you start speculating or hypothesizing or guessing or whatever word you want to use. Right? Start having opinions, whatever. Theorizing. That's another word. We have tons of words to refer to the same thing, the same end result. The same end result is we don't know what this evidence is evidence of, and we're curious to figure out, so we're going to hypothesize, speculate, assume, theorize, guess, whatever, right? So the fact that he's trying to play wordplay, which is very unintelligent to do, very childish to do, and all I was pointing out is like, dude, hypothesizing is just another way of saying speculation. So yes, archaeologists speculate. Speculation is usually based off of some evidence. Y'all have a little bit of evidence and y'all speculate, aka theorize, of what this little bit of evidence you have could be, and then you try to find more evidence to prove your hypothesis, aka your speculation. You're trying to make it seem like y'all do something different, and that's the thing I don't like, is this idea of trying to make it seem like what you do is right, what everybody else do is wrong. So you think, oh no, we hypothesize. That's different than guessing or speculating or assuming something. No, it's the same thing. You're just like the fancy word of saying hypothesize. No, we hypothesize. It's just another way of saying you speculate. You're guessing. You don't know. Which is why I point out that if the evidence was clear and obvious what it is, you wouldn't be hypothesizing, speculating, assuming, theorizing. You wouldn't be doing any of that if the evidence was obvious what it is. Obviously, you don't know what it is, so you have to hypothesize, speculate, and so forth. That's what I'm pointing out. Is like you're trying to do some wordplay stuff, where you're trying to say that hypothesizing is different from speculation, and what you do is hypothesize, not speculate. So you don't. Okay, I get it. You don't like the word speculation. You don't like the idea of somebody saying that what you do for a living is you speculate, aka guess, aka assume, because you want to act like, in your mind, you want to be like, no, I don't guess or speculate or assume anything. No, I hypothesize. I come up with an idea of what could this evidence be about, and then do some research and work and try to get as much evidence to come to the final conclusion of what this is. It's like it's still the same thing. You still speculate. You still don't know until you know. You still don't know until you know. So whether we say you're speculating, hypothesizing, theorizing, whatever, it don't matter. The word is irrelevant, because what you're doing is still the same. You can try to make it fancy what you do for a living and be like, we hypothesize. We don't speculate. We don't guess. We don't assume. It's like, but the rest of us is like, yeah, sure. You can believe you're not doing that, but that's what you are doing. You are speculating. You are guessing. You are assuming because you don't know. If you don't know, there's words for that. It's called speculating, guessing, assuming. We literally have those words for a reason because we know you don't know, which is why you have to hypothesize and speculate and assume and all and so forth and so forth. Just because we have different words for what you're doing doesn't mean what you're doing isn't what we say you're doing. We're not wrong. The thing is, you're trying to say we are wrong for saying that you speculate. That a lot of your job involves speculation, but it's true. There's very, very, very little evidence. Very little evidence. Now, I'm not saying there is no evidence. There's very little evidence that the Great Pyramid is a tomb. But there's a lot of evidence that it's not a tomb. There's lots. The air shafts. Why do you need air shafts if you're putting a dead body in there? The body doesn't need air, so why would you have air shafts? Plus, the idea is of putting a mummy in a tomb is to preserve it. They want the body to last long, not to deteriorate. And what deteriorates organic organisms? Oxygen. So it'd be a bad idea to put air shafts in your tomb or in a tomb because it will literally prevent preservation. There's a reason why when you have Tupperware, you put food in Tupperware and you seal it, right? It's vacuum sealed, right? And there's a sealing that seals it to prevent what? Air from getting in or even out. What you don't do is poke holes into your Tupperware because now you're letting air in, which is going to cause what? Mold. The food is going to spoil. The idea is to preserve, and the way you preserve is to try to take as much oxygen out. Now, if the air shafts are designed for the purpose of, all right, we put the pharaoh in there, and then we use the air shafts to suck air out and turn the tomb, the chamber, right, the king's chamber, into a vacuum chamber. That'd be interesting, right? To help preserve the pharaoh more. Then I'm like, okay, that's what the air shafts are for. It's to create a vacuum chamber, literally a vacuum chamber in the king's chamber, so that way it can preserve the pharaoh's body a lot better. I'm like, that is smart. That is cool. Okay, here's another piece of evidence towards it being a tomb, a very advanced tomb, because it literally has a vacuum chamber feature to it. That's kind of cool. But here's the thing. By a show of hands in the comments, tell me what other person has ever said that the air shafts probably is used to suck air out of the king's chamber, so that way they can vacuum seal it and preserve the pharaoh in the king's chamber if it was truly a tomb. Who else has said that? I'm probably the first person who just said that. And I bet you none of y'all ever heard anybody else say that. Because everybody else ignores that the air shafts matter. They just want to say that it's a tomb, but don't even describe what's the air shaft for. Again, like I said, if you're putting a dead body in there, why do you need air? Why do you need an air shaft? Unless you're doing the thing that I'm saying, which is very creative, which is the idea of putting, but taking air out of there. That would be pretty cool and interesting. Like, oh snap, y'all vacuum sealing the king's chamber. Okay, there's some evidence that it's a tomb, a very advanced tomb, but there's no archaeologist saying that. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm the one who's saying that probably how you can use the air shafts is to vacuum seal the king's chamber. But nobody's talking about it, so it's not real. The air shafts are not for vacuum sealing the king's chamber. Notice that the queen's chamber also has air shafts, but the air shafts don't go out into the sides of the pyramid. They stop, halfway in the pyramid. So the air shafts either are incomplete or they're complete and they just have a different function. So the thing is, there's air shafts, and no one explains why does a tomb need air shafts. Then there's other features, but the point is like, kind of lost track, but let me get back to the comment. So he replies with, I don't think you understand how science works. None of it is self-evident. like the world being round. It took developing hypotheses and ways to test them. That is science. And it's funny how he's trying to tell me what science is, even though that's what I just explained in my comment. If evidence was clear and obvious what it was, you wouldn't need to hypothesize. That means you don't need to do science. If science is about hypothesis, but the evidence is clear and obvious what it is, then there's no need to hypothesize. If you come up to a crime scene and you see the criminal there with the weapon and the person they murdered standing in front of you, you don't need to bring a detective. You don't need to solve the murder mystery. No, you know who did it. It's the person standing there with the gun. They murdered this person, so case closed. You don't need a detective. You don't need an archaeologist to figure shit out or to dig anything up, because all the evidence is right there in front of you. It's clear as day. So if the tomb was the great pyramid was truly a tomb, it'd be super simple. It'd be a simple construction, and it'd just be blatantly obvious. It's like, yeah, it's one chamber with a whole bunch of like thick barriers trying to make it hard for anyone to get to the chamber, and it's just a chamber, just a empty room, or not empty because the idea is the pharaoh's supposed to be in there, right? And with some decorations and whatnot, and it's just that. It's a simple place to hold the pharaoh in this big structure, and that's it. And that's all it is. There wouldn't be no queen's chamber. There's no subterranean chamber. There would be no air shafts. There would be no gallery. There'll be no void and big void, little void, all this extra shit. There definitely wouldn't be. There's a lot of other things in the pyramid. There would be no water under it. That's another thing. It's like the Great Pyramid is a terrible tomb if you put it above, build it on top of a aquifer, a water aquifer, basically water underground. You know what's gonna happen when water is underground, right? It erodes the ground. You know what happens when the ground under a heavy structure is eroded? Sinkhole happens. I'm surprised that the giant pyramid, I mean the Great Pyramid, hasn't sunk into the Giza plateau. Considering the fact that under the plateau, there's literally a water aquifer, right? There's water under the ground, and what usually happens is when there's water underground in a certain area, it tends to erode the ground, which makes it unstable, which makes it a sinkhole. I would hate somebody to put my tomb, right, the tomb that I'm supposed to be buried in, on top of a water aquifer that at some point would turn into a sinkhole. It's like, do you want the pyramid to sink under the Giza plateau? Because that seems like a bad place to put a tomb if it really was a tomb. But so far it doesn't look like a tomb. If anything, again, it looks like technology, because more likely the center core of the Great Pyramid is a big like lightning rod, and the idea is for it to get hit by lightning, and then the lightning travels down the lightning rod in the center of the pyramid, and it goes all the way down to the aquifer, right, the water under the Great Pyramid, and then creates electrolysis, aka using electricity to separate hydrogen from oxygen, separate the hydrogen and oxygen from water and create hydrogen and oxygen gas, and that gas will eventually go upwards, right? It'll come out from the ground, go upwards back into the pyramid somehow, right? Not somehow, but it'll come back through chambers. Oh, mind blown. The gas will come up through chambers, and it'll go through the queen's chamber, king's chamber, all that stuff, and stuff will happen, and a little bit of electric spark, and boom, the hydrogen then burns. It burns and turns back into water, by the way, and the water more likely is going to drain back down. So so the fact that, anyway, I'm not going to get into the full process of how the Great Pyramid works, because it's like I have lots to say about how it's technology and how it's a big hydrogen engine and all this extra stuff, and fire and all this other cool shit. But the point is like, if it was obvious that it was a tomb, I wouldn't be saying that it's not a tomb, because it would be just blatantly obvious it's a tomb. Even a newborn child would look at the pyramid like, oh yeah, obviously a tomb. But no, you have a lot of old people, young people that say, "Oh, it's not a tomb." Why? Because there's evidence that it's not a tomb. There's things that says this does not make sense to be a tomb. So let's talk about it. So here you see I respond with, "I know how science works better than you then, better than you, because I do, and you just proved me right." The last statement was you need a hypothesis, aka speculation, in order to, do your little science. And according to Google, speculation is a noun, speculation, plural, noun, speculation, right? Form 1 is the forming of a theory or conjecture without firm evidence. That means without it being obvious what it is. Hypothesis, also a noun, plural, hypothesis, right? A supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. In other words, both words means guessing without firm or limited evidence. So again, when you hypothesize or you speculate, you're doing the same thing. You're proposing an idea, you're giving a theory, you're guessing, whatever word you want to use, on something that you have very little evidence. So you have very little evidence, you're going to speculate. You have very little evidence, you're going to hypothesize. Notice that both will happen because you have little evidence, right? So guessing, speculation, hypothesis, all the same. So according to Google, in the definition of speculation, hypothesis, they're pretty much the same thing. You're guessing about something because of an evidence. A theory is based off of partial evidence. Speculation is off of partial evidence. Hypothesis is off of partial evidence. Notice the pattern. That's all I'm saying. So that's why I don't like it when people do that ignorant thing. Is like they're trying to play some wordplay and not realizing it's like you're saying the same thing just in a different way. Hypothesis and speculation is the same thing. Just be like, all right, they do mean roughly the same thing, or they're very similar in their definition. Fine. The fact that he doesn't even respond with, showing what speculation and hypothesis, the definition, to try to prove me wrong that speculation isn't the same thing as hypothesis. You notice I went to the trouble of Google searching and copy and pasting speculation and hypothesis and the definition of speculation and hypothesis to prove that he's wrong for thinking both are not the same thing. They're the same thing. Archaeologists do speculate, just like people who are not archaeologists also speculate. The only reason we have theories and ideas that the pyramid, Great Pyramid, is not a tomb, even though archaeologists say it is because we see evidence that it is not. We see it. We're looking at the same thing y'all looking at, and we're saying no. Based off of the material evidence, the pyramid itself is the material evidence. We're looking at the pyramid and we're like, that's not a tomb. We see evidence that it's not. And instead of, being respectful and be like, all right, y'all looking at what we're looking at, but you don't agree with us. That's understandable. Okay, let's us try to, explain why it is a tomb. Instead of just saying, no, it's a tomb because we're archaeologists and we know everything and we say it's a tomb, so it's a tomb. Even though y'all make a whole bunch of videos showing that it's not a tomb, you're wrong. We're right because we say it's a tomb. Yeah, y'all saying it's a tomb and not showing any true evidence that it's a tomb is literally hypocrisy, because it's literally what y'all say we do. Y'all make it seem like we just say it's not a tomb and show no evidence. No, we show evidence. We make videos about the evidence. We show that it's not a tomb. We explain that it's not a tomb, step by step. All y'all say is, it is a tomb. That's all y'all say. Y'all evidence that it's a tomb is that y'all just say that it is. And because y'all archaeologists, y'all just saying it's a tomb is supposed to be a fact. It's supposed to be evidence. Y'all act like saying that it is a tomb is y'all evidence, even though we have evidence that it's not. And the thing is, we have more evidence. Now, if y'all have other evidence that we have yet to see that says it is a tomb, that's definitively a tomb, well, y'all need to start making videos showing us that definitive proof that it's a tomb. That's the thing. Y'all not showing us proof that it's not a tomb. We have tons of videos on YouTube proving that it isn't a tomb. So explain that. we have evidence that it's not a tomb, but y'all don't show us evidence that it is.